Escribí esta novela porque sentía yo la necesidad de expresar muchas de las inseguridades, creo yo, que yo tenía cuando estaba creciendo y para tratar de entenderme a mí mismo, ¿no? Mi lugar en mi espacio del que estaba viviendo. Entonces traté de escribir pedazos, cachitos, ¿no? de estos sentimientos, principalmente triggered por los journals que yo juntaba, ¿no? Que yo escribía a lo largo de mi vida. It had to be written in Spanish because when I started studying Chicano literature and I became exposed to Chicano literature in Spanish, etc., and because of my insecurities with my Espanol, it became like a challenge to me to write. I wanted to prove that I could write in Spanish, that I could be living, being a Chicano in the United States who could function in Spanish, even if I was not living in Mexico. Stanford, when we were there, they wanted us to write our dissertations in English. My question was, I'm in the Spanish program and I can't write my dissertation in Spanish. I wanted the challenge, of actually doing something important en la lengua de la cual estaba inseguro, ¿no? I did have to petition for my dissertation to be written in Spanish, and luckily they did accept it. It's the same thing with Marco Solís. I wanted to express it in Spanish because of the fact that it was a challenge to work on something that would matter, in terms of the survival of the language.
The novel Marco Solís comes in 2020. That's how many years is that? That's 55 years later, from the Chicano movement, almost, or 50 years at least. It comes in that late, and yet it's still adamant about having those words come out in Spanish. And that's the reason why you see the Spanish that is written in that novel is very natural. It's not forced. It's a graceful syntax, even in Spanish. It's very enjoyable to read.
La palabra como el silencio. El silencio es una palabra muy bonita, creo yo, ¿no? Porque no necesariamente quiere decir algo que estás apartándote de alguien o de algo, sino el silencio es un amigo, ¿no? Es una manera de conectarte contigo mismo, ¿no? Ir al interior de ti. El silencio vive dentro de nosotros. Entonces, yo tuve la fortuna de vivir en una casita que estaba a varias cuadras de la playa, ¿no? Y en la noche, a veces, cuando podía, subía al techo de la casa y desde allí podía escuchar más profundamente las olas del mar en la noche y escuchar los sonidos que nos da la noche, ¿no? Entonces no era la oscuridad no daba miedo, sino al contrario, traía tranquilidad, por lo menos para mí. Entonces, me gustaría leer esta sección que se llama Silencio. ¿Okay? El silencio. El silencio de la noche es mi aliado. Penetra en mí sin preguntas o rencores. No intenta perjudicar. No ofrece ambigüedades. Existe. Es exclusivo y quiero creer que me pertenece. Sentado en esta piedra, el silencio gira piadosamente a mi alrededor y se une con el agua del mar para producir otro silencio. El silencio que siento es un silencio más allá de lo profundo. Flota alrededor mío, chocando suavemente en movimientos inoportunos por toda la cara. El silencio esconde gritos y voces de toda una ciudad. En algún lugar de ella, en un rincón, alguien ama o llora y nadie lo sabrá. El silencio que gira a mi alrededor hace comunión con el mar. Apropio una voz que me habla sin preferencias a una sola lengua. Me habla del ayer y del hoy en sonidos que penetran delicadamente. Es cierto que en presencia de otra gente no sé hablar en voz alta. Únicamente en mi soledad puedo hablar dentro de mí, comprendiéndome o traicionándome, con mis propias palabras. En la oscuridad mis palabras flotan por el aire espeso de la playa. El mar que veo y no veo es el cuerpo de una sombra que las recibe y las hace vibrar de emoción, que las alimenta y protege.
It's an interesting coming-of-age story that I find incredibly valuable for many reasons. First of all, because it's set in a space which is not necessarily a space of enunciation for Chicano literature, and that would be Santa Barbara. And I believe any novel or written document or visual or cultural production that is produced outside of the normal spaces gives us a lot of light on how the migration and the community that migrates lives their life and how different these experiences can be.
Jesús Rosales' novel is set in a very unique suburb of Southern California outside of LA that involves the quintessential colonialist space that is predicated on this whole Spanish heritage mythos in which Mexicans are invisibilized. So his novel represents a defiant shout, a defiant reclamation of not just the Spanish, the language that is his birth language, but also the presence of Mexican Spanish, Mexican modismos, and dichos, and all the costumbre, all the customs that come from vernacular, underclass workers in the service industry, proletarian workers that are in the Southern California area, though not necessarily in Santa Barbara, but it's nonetheless a world that is not the very familiar farm worker realm.
My father was worked as a janitor, and he also was a gardener, and he was able to afford a house on La Mesa, where now you can buy the house for more than $1 million or more. Siente un poco de nostalgia el regresar aquí a la casa donde por primera vez venimos a Estados Unidos en 1964. Me da mucho gusto de que todavía esté la casa en pie, ¿no? Que todavía puede uno venir y verla, porque muchas de las casas aquí en Santa Bárbara, los lugares se han perdido. Entonces, aunque todavía es muy viejita, creo yo que vale mucho la pena venir y regresar a verla y revivir momentos buenos y malos. It was working class, and even then my father used to say, quiero que te eduques para que no hagas el trabajo como yo, you know. Get educated, get college education, so you don't have to do this job that I'm doing right now.
As you read it, it's, like I said, it's not presumptuous, but it's trying to invite, seduce you into this world of the migrants who have different dichotomies, different things to face, challenges, and so forth. And it's a matter of trying to find that middle ground in which they will feel more at ease, or sometimes in peace, and more whole with a W.
Me identifico con la luna llena que Marco y yo sabemos que sale con lealtad a cierta hora detrás de la montaña, la misma que horas más tardes iluminará majestuosamente un camino plateado por la superficie tentativa imperfecta del mar. Y así termina la historia. Gracias.
We realize that some of these things have not changed as much as we'd like for them to change. So I think Marco Solís It's just a subtle reminder. No, you don't have to be a Spanish major, but you can enjoy the syntax, the language, the references, the fact that it connects so easily with the American environment, social, political, historical. It's just a very well written and well rounded novel in that regard.
Emergency poetics is something that I pretty much came up with to try to analyze actually this, like literary production and artistic production that kind of works against the grain. And because of that, falls within specific categories that forces institutions to not look at it directly or to name these types of works as something outside of the canon or not following specific logics. And a Chicano novel written in Spanish would be perfect for that.
So it's a sort of a metacritical meditation on the Mexico de afuera discourse, even as it is a defiant insistence upon a reclamation of Spanish as his language, even though it's also layered with colonialism, but it's his language that is intimate and it's home, and even though that home is not satisfying. So it's a pretty complex navigation of Spanish.
The metaphor of El Hombre de Arena, translated as a sandman, is connected to the first part of, or the title of the book that is called Marco Solís. You know, Marco, in a way, it's a frame, and the last name is Solís, which kind of goes hand in hand with being placed with a word with solitude in a way. So it's un marco solo, an empty frame, you might say. And the Hombre de Arena, the Sandman, is the one that is part of that frame, that it's in construction. So it's a fragmented soul in a way, a fragmented person, but one that doesn't mean that it's going to be dissolved or annulled from life. On the contrary, to try to understand those pieces, to maybe at the end of the book solidify something special, a being. You know? So the idea of Marco Solís in the end might be un hombre, and get out and take out the arena out. You know, become a man without the sand, and hopefully be somebody. So at the end of the book, maybe the idea that it will be a frame with some type of an identity.